My name's Alyssa. My parents were divorced from a very young age, so I grew up with two separate lives, and I lived full-time with my mum. My mum was an artist. She was a painter, a sewer, anything creative. She was just all over it. And the part-time I lived with my dad, and we lived in Yarra Glen on a farm, and that farm we bred alpacas. We were one of the first families in Australia to breed alpacas. We bred alpacas and sheep, and we had horses, and I was immersed in nature. I spent a lot of my time not really interested in flowers, but mostly interested in nature. So I'd always pick up sticks and stones and make little things on the farm, and I'd be in nature a lot. We rode our horses through the forest. And my dad was a geologist, so I had a bit of a love of nature from my dad. And then living with my mum, I got quite a lot of her creative skills. And during high school, I focused on the arts side of things. I never really knew what I wanted to do with my career, and I didn't, even when I was leaving school, I didn't want to finish school, but I finished school because I was made to. Became unemployed for a while there, and there was a bit of pressure for me to get a job from my parents, my dad in particular. And so I started applying for a lot of just different jobs, and there was a florist assistant job that came up, and I knew nothing about the company. The company was called Kevin O'Neill Flowers, and I was being hassled by my stepmom at the time about my job prospects. So I said to her, look, I'm going for an interview with Kevin O'Neill Florist. And she was like, oh my God, it's so exciting. It's the most famous florist in Australia. I went there and I nailed the interview. So they were happy for me to jump on board, and suddenly I was working in South Yarra for a really fancy florist. What got me over the line was that when I was 16, I had done work experience in a florist. And that was just pure chance, because when I was 16, I left everything to the last minute. So I sort of walked past a florist in my area and asked if I could do work experience there. And they said yes. So that was all basic, sweeping the floors and making ribbons and just all the sort of junior stuff. And at the end of that, they gave me a review. It was a wonderful review. And they said if I ever wanted to pursue a career in floristry, then I'd be great at it. But when I was 16, I thought there's no chance I want to be a florist. I was creative and artistic and thought that I wanted to paint beautiful pictures or, sketches, or maybe even make clothes for a living. But I didn't think that I would ever want to be a florist, because at that stage, it was regarded as an old ladies industry. Like there wasn't, it wasn't something that I thought, this is what I want to do with my life. And this is 25 years ago or so. So it was definitely not as interesting as it is now. It was lilies and roses and baby's breath and just round and A-line shapes. And so it didn't seem very inspiring to me. So fast forward to when I was 19 is when I went for this interview. Experience really helped with getting that position. So I started at Kevin O'Neill Flowers, and he was ahead of his time. He was someone that was flamboyant and out there as a personality. He had just actually passed away a few months before I started working there. And his partner, John, Kevin and John, business partners and life partners, they had created Kevin O'Neill Flowers. So John had kept Kevin O'Neill going. So when I joined the team, it was a little bit of a weird situation, because people were mourning the death of the leader, and then they had John take over, and John was all accounts based and business based, and it was sort of losing the essence of what Kevin had created. The atmosphere in the South Yarra shop was quite abrupt and rude, so they were treating their juniors really rudely, the way that I would never ever treat anyone. So if the floor needed sweeping, they would just yell out sweep, and they'd all stand back, barely enough room for me to sweep under their feet. They're always, yelling at me for coffees and this and that. I was just running around like crazy. I did learn to box some arrangements and wrap things, but I was always just out the back, just, not feeling good about my job decision. So I only lasted there a few months, and I decided to leave. And they said to me, look, would really like you to stay around, this and that. I said, no, I think I'm just going to go off and study floristry or something, you know, so I'm going to do something different. And went off and thought, well, if I'm interested in floristry, what would I do? There was some apprenticeships and TAFE courses, and it was all pretty old-fashioned. So I'd just been at this job with Kevin O'Neill, florist, he was a leader in the industry, and he was making big suspended things, and this is a long time ago, before it was really popular. He was part of the David Jones flower show that they had there annually, and he would do a lot of famous weddings. So when I was looking at the TAFE courses, they were just still old-fashioned, old lady arrangements. It just seemed really boring to me. So I thought, no, I don't want to be a florist. So a few months had passed, and then I get a call from Kevin O'Neill, florist again. They said, look, we've got a position open at our David Jones section. And so what they did is they had their main retail shop in South Yarra, and then they had this little retail shop within David Jones in the CBD. And David Jones Florist was Kevin O'Neill's baby little project, but John was never really into the David Jones side of things, because David Jones had a bit more of a fun, uplifting environment. Everyone was nice there. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of no rude sweeping floor incidences. And so Kevin had a real passion for David Jones. John, on the other hand, was really quite abrupt, and so John was more of the South Yarra sort of vibe. So anyway, I thought, why not? I'll give it a go. Joined the team, and they were lovely. I met my first mentor, Odette, there, and spent 6 months working with them and having fun. Kevin O'Neill was known for his amazing arrangements Australia-wide, but also he had a really particular wrapping style. And so at David Jones, there was this big marble bench where you'd wrap in front of the customers. And wrapping's always daunting for anyone in the industry. Learning to wrap is a whole nother skill level. And so I was thrown straight into wrapping in front of a crowd of people, because people would come to watch that. And, you know, one little bunch of lilies would end up being wrapped and end up this big bunch with all this tissue and cellophane and all this stuff. So it was quite interesting, and it was a great experience. But then John came to the shop one day and he said, I'm closing down David Jones. It's been 1 year since Kevin died. Kevin's wish was, please just keep David Jones Florist open at least for a year. And a year to the day, John came in and closed it down. And it was really sad. I was unemployed again and still thinking about what I wanted to do. Do I want to be a florist? There's not much out there. If there was a complete floristry course around back then, it would have been perfect for me, but there was just nothing. It just still didn't really suit my creativity level. At that stage, I already learnt some bouquets and posies and how to sell in retail, and I was starting to enjoy it. So unemployed again, and then a few months later, I got a phone call from Sydney, general manager of David Jones, and she rang me, and I still don't know how she got my number to this day, really, or where she thought my skill level was at. But she called me and she said, we're restructuring David Jones Florist. We need a manager, and we need an assistant manager, and we need a whole new team. And would you be interested in coming on board and managing David Jones Florist for us? And I thought to myself, I've only had about 7 months experience in floristry. She has no idea who I am. I don't know how she's got my number or what sort of position she thinks I had, but I didn't say that to her. And I just said, look, I would be interested definitely in coming back and helping you run it, but I don't think I have the skill level for a manager. I'll find you a manager, and I'd like to be assistant manager. And she said, that sounds great. Let's do that. And I think that's at the time in my life when I realised that you need to fake it till you make it. Because I saw an opportunity, and I didn't know that about myself until that moment, or years later looking back, that I saw an opportunity and I just thought, well, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to see what happens. So got off the phone, rang Odette, and I said to her, how about this? I've got this great opportunity, quit Varzette, come work at David Jones, you'll be the manager, I'll be the assistant manager, and we'll run this place. And she said, wow, that's crazy, let's do it. She ended up running David Jones Florist for the next 2 years. And we had so much fun. She taught me everything that I knew. I had no training, no formal training. David Jones we did a really good job. The sales were up. We were running it in a similar way to how Kevin O'Neill used to run it. And it went really well. And then Odette decided to leave. She wanted to start her own shop. She owns Village Blooms in Essendon, and that's really successful. It has been ever since then. And the new manager that was coming on board was someone that I didn't really gel with, so I decided that it was time to move on. And so this is 2.5 years into my career, and I had assistant manager credentials, and I'd worked for Kevin O'Neill, the most famous florist in Australia, for a small amount of time. And then I had helped run David Jones Florist. So instantly I was able to apply for so many different jobs. And a lot of these jobs were advertised as a qualified florist. They wanted qualified florists. So I started applying for these jobs thinking I'm not qualified, but I've got a good resume, so we'll see what happens. And no one ever asked to see my qualification. They just said, "Are you qualified?" I said, yes. Never had to show any paperwork. So still faking it till I made it. And ended up landing myself a manager position at a florist called Flower Co. And had a few other little jobs in between, but ended up at Flower Co, managed their store for a couple of years, and then just kept building my resume. And I was always in and out of jobs. I kept jobs for a few years, but then I'd get bored, or something didn't really gel well with me, so I'd move on. And after that, ended up managing and working for a whole lot of florists throughout Melbourne. I now know, looking back, that that's what helped me become who I am today and be able to teach, because I had so much experience in all the different suburbs in Melbourne and all the different styles, and it helped me grow into a really versatile florist. And then I ended up having a few incidents at one of the jobs I was working for. There was a few dodgy people in the area, and I actually ended up getting held up by a knife in one of my florists that I was working for, and that scared me a lot, and it was a pretty full-on experience. And I'd already had a few experiences that I didn't like and didn't feel comfortable with at that particular shop. And so I decided after that I was going to take a break from floristry and go travelling and start seeing the world a little bit. And in order to save some money to go travelling, I decided to start working in homewares. Ended up coming back and had no money, and was living at home with my mum again, and decided that I didn't like homewares, still didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Did I want to be a florist? Not sure. And decided that I would get a few different jobs in the industry, and no full-time job, no running a shop, no getting told what to do all the time. And so I decided to start working at the flower market, the wholesale flower market, when it was in Footscray. And so that was night shift. And that was generally we'd start at 11 p.m. and finish at about 8 a.m. So full night shift. A lot of fun. Back then it was a lot of fun. The vibe was awesome. The behind the scenes of floristry, there's a lot going on always there that was fascinating and intriguing and just interesting characters. I ended up meeting a lot of florists, so that helped me get some florist jobs. I ended up working, so I had a night shift and then I had an afternoon shift at another job. And the afternoon shift in this retail shop, my position was just setting up for the actual florists to come in and make the arrangements, because I didn't know if I wanted to be a florist. So I would set up the boxes and do all the paper and get ready in the afternoon for them to come in the next day and have their shift. And it'd all be set up nicely for them. So at the market, I had a good friend and mentor, Cara. She introduced me to a whole lot of people in the industry that didn't seem so relevant back then. I now know, looking back, that it's helped me in my career now. And then my afternoon shift, I met this lady called Karen, and she was a lot older. So I was in my early 20s and she was in her late 60s at that stage. It's funny, we got along really well. And she said, what is it that you want to do with your life and your career? And I said to her, I have no idea. She said, well, what is it that you like? And I said to her, I was at that age where my friends had all started to get married. There's just a few sort of dribbling in at that stage. And one of my friends had said, could you do my flowers? I said, well, why not? That sounds fun. And I met her and her mum at a cafe, and I had a conversation with her that was just very casual, and it was fun, and ended up making her flowers. It was a wonderful feeling being part of the wedding and also being a guest and seeing these big, beautiful arrangements that everyone was admiring, and I loved that. So I happened to mention that to Karen. And Karen said to me, it was just a casual comment, but Karen said to me, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Oh my God, I think I've met you for a reason. And I said, oh, okay, what's this about? And she said that she had this dream that she wanted to leave a bit of a legacy. She had a shop many years previously, and it was called From the Heart Flowers. And it was a retail shop, it did really well. And she was ready to retire. She'd had a bit of a tough life, she had a really hard family life. She had a son that had some heart problems and a husband that didn't treat her well, and they'd made her, for some reason, her husband had made her shut down her shop, and she just loved it. And then she ended up working in this crappy little small, workroom of a florist with me. She had this vision and this idea to create a home consulting wedding florist, basically. And back then, the only things that existed in the floristry world were bricks and mortar shops, so only retail. There was no event florist, and there was no wedding florist, or there was no one worked from home. It wasn't a thing yet. And so her idea was florists to go into people's houses and have consultations with their husband, their bridesmaids, their mothers, their fathers, have a cup of tea and eat some biscuits and just really get to know the client and talk to them about their wedding. And so she decided that I'd been sent to her from God and that was going to actually happen. And I said, oh, I've done one wedding. In all the retail shops that I worked in at that point, no one did, it wasn't weddings. Like, we didn't do weddings. We might have made a bouquet for a wedding, but it wasn't really much of a thing. So I knew a lot about retail side of things, and I'd done some amazing events with Kevin O'Neill, but I was pushing trolleys and just in awe. I used to be in awe of all these massive installations they did and thought, I don't even know how you would do that. But yeah, I hadn't made or even done much with weddings. So Karen said, that's okay, I can train you. And I was like, okay. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I decided that why not? Fake it till you make it. I see an opportunity, it lands in my lap, and I go for it. And it scares me all the time because I never feel like I'm ready for it, but I don't know how to say no. We spent the afternoons working together. We'd do our job, and while we're doing our job, she would be training me and talking to me about weddings. And then we spent some of our spare time buying flowers and getting trained for weddings. Had our first consultations. She wanted to name the business From the Heart Flowers, and which was perfect for weddings back then. And it wasn't really a name I would choose for my business, but it was her dream. We went to the first consultation and sat down, because I didn't know anything about costing weddings or how to talk to brides, but she trained me in about 6 months. And we'd sit down with the bride and groom, their mum, whoever wanted to be involved, and have a cup of tea. And I worked out that it was a brilliant idea because we got to step into their home, and when you step into someone's home, you can see a bit about their style, their taste, perhaps, what sort of budget they might have and what colours they like. If there's no pink in the house, they generally might not have liked any pink in their flowers. And so you got to know the clients really well by stepping into their environment. So we decided to launch From the Heart Flowers. We went to our first bridal fair, and this is right when websites were starting to be a thing. So we had business cards that just had our names, the business name, and a pretty photo. And a few people would flip over the back of the card, and I'd be like, what are they looking for? And because we didn't have a website, so they'd be like, oh, you don't have a website. And I was like, oh, here we go, we're gonna build a website. And so Karen, being in her late 60s, knew nothing about websites, and I knew nothing about websites. So That was the beginning of that. But we did a couple of weddings together, and then it was about 8 months in when she rang me and she said, I feel that you're fully trained now. I know that I've done what I needed to do in life, and I've got all this stuff going on in my life, and I don't think I'll be able to help you anymore. I'm going to hand this over to you. This is your business now. And I was really freaked out by that. I had someone that was going to do it with me. I thought I was helping her. She said, I believe in you. I think that you're going to leave a really good legacy for me. And it turns out that she was really unwell. And I didn't know that at the time. So she was attempting to have this one last go at her dreams. And this, I didn't know until a little while later, but I thought when she left me with the business that she would be there as a mentor, but I never saw her again. Never saw her again. And I believe that she's my guardian angel, and she's helped me through my career, and I don't know her story. I tried to call her house a few times, but her husband wouldn't let her come to the phone, and then I heard a few stories through the grapevine, but I never saw her again. Never saw her again. And that was quite upsetting and scary, and I thought, what am I going to do? I'm 27 at that stage. All my friends are going out and parties, and people are getting married. I'm doing friends' weddings, but I'd created a life where my weekends were full of wedding work, and all my friends were going out, and I was trying to balance both of those. I didn't know what I was doing. I was trying to build a website, and I actually didn't know anything about business and minimal about weddings, but I was like, I can't not do this. I can't not do this. This is a legacy to somebody, and perhaps mine one day. Karen essentially set my whole career in motion, and I did not know that at the time, because I still thought to myself, I don't even know if I like weddings. I don't even know if I want to be a florist. Weddings back then were it just wasn't creative enough for me. I thought I wanted more. And wedding bouquets back then, they were all dome posies and teardrops, and no one had much, like there was no Instagram and there's not many websites, and so there was only bridal magazines, and most of the brides wanted to see what I'd previously done, and so they'd just choose different color combinations of the things that I'd done, and I would say we could do this, or we could add in some different nature and wild, or some bark, or a little bit of this, and they were like, oh, I don't know what that would look like. These days with Instagram, there's just so much creativity and different designs and inspiration out there that it's a whole lot more me these days. So I potted along and thought, well, this will do for now, and started to rank quite highly in the Australian Bridal Industry Academy Awards. And this was an award that past brides submit their application, and it was based on, so it wasn't a competition where we made something, it was based on their experience with our business. And it was based on creativity, customer service, value for money, and things like that. And the customer service side of things was based on the fact that I was a home-based florist and a home consulting. And it took off really well. It was from the heart flowers. It was really from the heart for me. After not seeing Karen ever again, it felt really from the heart. So I adapted to the name, and the name went really well in the wedding industry. And so From the Heart Flowers started winning all these awards. So within the first year of being in business, we came I think 5th place in Melbourne for the wedding flowers, and then continued over the next 8 years winning awards. So the business took off really quickly, and it's always taken off. Whatever I've done has taken off so quick that I've always been chasing it, running behind it, going, wait for me. Started my business running from my house in Carlton, and so I was home-based and I'd go to people's homes, and then it outgrew that after a couple of years. And so I started looking for a studio or a warehouse, and I found one in Collingwood. Wedding season, everything was going well, and then it hit winter. And I panicked because I hadn't really thought it through, just because there's not much income that was coming in. Wedding season back then was very structural, like October to March. And anyway, so it hit winter, and I decided that I needed some corporate flowers, weekly flowers, to help with cash flow. So delivering to restaurants and cafes, and getting a weekly income. So I started to get a few here and there. Went to the market to buy my flowers. Said to my friend Cheryl from Dakota Flowers, I need more corporates. And she goes, oh, I know someone that's selling their corporate business. And I said, I don't need another business. I just need the corporates. And she said, no, Amanda, you'll love her. She's looking for the right person to sell her corporate business to. You really should chat to her. So I called Amanda and she was lovely, we got along great. And I said, look, I don't know about buying your whole business. I don't have any cash. I don't need another business. I'm just trying to work out how to run one of them. And we got talking, we met. She loved me. She said, you're going to be perfect for my clients. You're similar to me. I've had other people interested in buying the business, but they're not right for the business. And so her business was called Thrive Flowers. And she was in the CBD in a retail store. And then they knocked the building down that she was in. And she decided to be home-based florist, but still deliver corporate flowers. And she had 100 corporates on her list. And some of them were like Parks Victoria, Host Plus, Allianz, and all these big lawyers' offices and superannuation. And anyway, so she had 100 people on her list, and she was regularly delivering on a Monday morning, probably about 50 offices. And it was amazing. I was like, this is wonderful, but I can't afford a new business. I don't want a new business. She said, no, you have to buy it. You have to buy it, you're perfect. I said, well, and she goes, how about you pay it off over a year? Or 2 if it takes that. And I was like, that's unheard of. So she put me on a payment plan. I took over Thrive Flowers and what, opportunity rises? Why not? So then I started running Thrive Flowers and From the Heart Flowers from the same studio and could not work out how to merge their names. Thrive Flowers was really well known for corporates. How to change From the Heart Flowers to Thrive Flowers because everyone knew From the Heart Flowers had won awards. So I was just struggling trying to run them separate businesses in the same space. In 2013, decided to go into a business partnership with my best friend Rosie. And so Rosie had been around since the very beginning. When my friend that was always working late with me and starting early and eating pizza and drinking wine while making buttonholes. And I had really good friends and they all did that. But she was the most consistent and she was interested in the business. So she decided to go into a business partnership with me and we were in business for 8 years. And during that time, we decided to focus on the events side of Thrive, weddings and Thrive events. We had the corporates, but we managed to merge the names and call the whole business Thrive Flowers and Events. And then we still had the little wedding side as From the Heart, a little plaque on the front door. So now the whole business is Thrive Flowers. Rosie and I were in business, successful business for 8 years together as best friends. We're not anymore. We're still good friends, just went our separate ways throughout COVID. COVID really makes or breaks a business or a friendship. Rosie ended up being a bit of the face of the business because I was a bit shy. I didn't really like to promote myself. Rosie would go be on site as my friend, and before she was in business, and I'd be setting something up, she'd be helping, but she'd see customers come in, she's like selling me, like, oh, this is Alyssa, oh, she does wonderful arrangements, and I was always embarrassed by that. But when she came into business with me, I thought, this is brilliant, you can do that side of things. And so she took over the social media and the marketing. She had someone pushing me and believing in me, and I just never really believed in myself. I know now that my path was set out for me somehow. A very long time ago, I've had this path set out, and I've just been wandering it aimlessly trying to work out what the purpose is. I still wasn't sure of my purpose. Been in different competitions and won quite a lot of things. We were called upon to be the first florist to have a roaming floral display at the Melbourne and Flower Garden Show. And we had started designing costumes out of flowers, and we loved going to festivals, so we'd bring out these fresh flower costumes at festivals 2 days in when everyone was really dirty and, there's nothing fresh around, so we'd have fully fresh flowers that we were keeping alive in our tents for the whole time and have these big bustles of flowers. And so then we started to get paid to go to these festivals and do these performances dressed in our flower costumes. We ended up winning an award, the Australian Flower Industry Award for Sustainability in probably 2012, like a long time ago, when there was still foam around. So we were sustainable in ethos of the business and the way that we thought of the industry. We were as sustainable as we knew how. And so we ended up winning that award. The first 2 times they ever had that award, we won the first 2 years, which was an honour, which then we ended up in the industry magazines, and then we got asked to be a part of the flower show and wear our costumes walking around. Then we got flown to Queensland to talk at some industry events, and since then I've been flown to Queensland a few times to talk about a few different things. One of them being our pop-up shops. We started to get really known for, we would pop up at Valentine's Day and Mother's Day, and we would pop up in the middle of the city in those little like booths that open up, and we would play sort of 1920s music, and we'd dress up in corsets and big bustles of flowers and really classy and elegant, but really men and women were drawn to that, because the women would be like, oh, can you buy me flowers from them? And the men would be like, oh, that they look lovely. And so they took off really well, and we were just quite innovative for our time at that point. And so that's where some of the awards came from as well. And what we were doing is just having fun in business, just 2 best friends having fun and just doing whatever we wanted, and it just happened to work out really well. And so at one stage I was flown up to Queensland to talk to a whole big industry about our pop-up shops and how to go about having a pop-up shop. So that was a lot of work. We decided to stop doing that after a while, because making costumes and popping up in places and then events and weddings, and it all just got a lot. But it was a lot of fun. Rosie and I had a lot of laughter and heaps of fun. I needed to learn how to run a business. And so I would always seek out help from people, and no one ever seemed to know how to help a florist. It seemed that florists weren't actively looking for help. Like a lot of retail shops, they get their flowers out, they condition, they open their doors, they sell flowers, they shut their doors, they go home. But me, I was this little lost soul running around thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I don't know what I'm doing. Consistently, imposter syndrome, fake it till you make it, for a big part of my career. I went and did the niece program through Centrelink, and no one really had a florist there before. And then I went and did a few business courses, and they were like, oh, we've never helped a florist. And so this industry is so different to any other industry that it was very general, and there was often men that were holding these courses. So I didn't feel like I could connect to them. So I'd learned, it was just very businessy. I started freelancing for a lot of different retail shops because I knew a lot of people in the industry, and I ended up working in a lot of shops that were about to get sold. So the business owner would want to up the profits and make the shop really valuable and then sell it. And so I started getting a few jobs doing that. Set a shop in Point Cook, just in a shopping centre shop, and I was doing my thing, and I had someone come in one day from the Gordon TAFE and say, are you qualified? And I was like, I've never been asked that question, and I didn't know who he was. And I was like, depends who's asking. First time in my whole career I'd got asked, are you qualified? Turned out this man was from the Gordon TAFE, and he was, they were qualifying florists that weren't qualified, so it was recognised prior learning. And I was able to go study at the Gordon TAFE for a little while and then get a qualification. And I thought to myself, I probably don't need one at this stage, but why not? It's free, I get to study, and it ended up being a bit of a business course as well, which was perfect because it was industry based. So I drove to Geelong once a week for 6 months, I think. And I met the teachers there, and one of the teachers was Yvette Timmins from Bloom College. So Yvette ended up assessing me and qualifying me. So in order for her to finalise this, she had to come to my studio, and she had to watch me work. She had to see the way that I quoted and the way that I sold things and how I conducted myself in my own business to make sure that I could qualify. So she walks into my studio in Collingwood, and when she walks in, she goes, oh, wow, this is an amazing space. And it was pretty cool. So I got my tick of approval and finally got qualified like 10 years into my career and having my own business for a while and winning awards. And so that was quite funny in my mind because I've never needed that piece of paper since either. But anyway, I met Yvette Timmins, and a few months after that, Yvette rings me and she said she's creating a new concept. It's going to be a private school. There's a gap between the industry and TAFE. She just saw a gap in the market and wanted to create something wonderful. It was called Bloom College. And she asked if she could use my studio in Collingwood to launch it in Melbourne. She asked me if I wanted to teach for Bloom College, and I said, no way. There's no way I'm confident enough to teach. I don't know anything about teaching. It's not in my life plan. You can just hire the studio. So she hired the studio and other teachers came, and it was fascinating to watch them. And it took Yvette probably about a year to really talk me down and say, you're going to be a great teacher. You'll be really good at this. And this is the start of knowing Yvette now for about 10 years, and Yvette helping me step out of my comfort zone and forcing me to do things I'm not comfortable with, which I'm forever grateful for, because I wouldn't be where I am today without her. So I started teaching about 9 years ago and ended up loving it. And here I am 9 years later. I've taught for Bloom College for, it's just been their 10-year anniversary this year, and I taught with them for 9 years, ended up helping Yvette with the classes, took over Port Melbourne Bloom College classroom prior to COVID, and as principal teacher, and sort of took on more of a responsibility. And then COVID happened, and as we all know, the whole world shut down, but definitely florists and floristry schools, or event florists and floristry schools, were not necessary, not an essential business. So I felt like I was losing everything. We had to shut down the classroom in Port Melbourne, and the classroom in Collingwood was also our studio. That was completely dead for ages because we had no weddings and no events, all these cancellations, like everything was just a massive nightmare. And so I panicked and decided that I needed to go work in a retail store to make money. Here we are in 2023 in April, and I'm sitting in this big warehouse in Moorabbin that we've nearly been in for a year. This happened. This is what came out of COVID. We spent 2 years really struggling, trying to keep everything together, trying to keep the Collingwood studio, trying to keep our sanity, trying to rebook and keep probably 150 wedding clients' emotions in check. Weddings kept getting cancelled. We lost money. We nearly lost our business so many times. And obviously the business partnership didn't work out, but out of that, I've ended up with running Thrive Flowers on my own, and I've got a brilliant, amazing team, but it grew so big after COVID. We made sure to stay relevant during COVID, keep up the morale, still post. Sometimes I didn't feel like I could get out of bed. I was starting to get quite depressed. It was just getting really dire a lot through COVID. But kept going, got the help I needed, like great family support network and friends and colleagues and professional help, and really just kept talking about it. So what I do is just talk. Like if anything's hard, I generally talk about it, probably cry about it, but just keep talking to try not to keep it to myself, which has helped. But business grew so big that, the classes came back on, the weddings came back on, the events came back on, the corporates took a while, but they started coming back now, and we needed a bigger warehouse. 5 of us full-time that work here, and you'll get to meet them during your course. I look back on my story, and I hope you find it interesting, and think that all of that has happened for a reason, and my purpose in life is to inspire people and help people grow and feel confident in life, but in their creative skills and their floristry journey. And I love teaching so much, and I love my events side of the business so much that I couldn't ever decide if I was just going to keep one or the other. So merging them both into this beautiful space means that my students can get to witness what goes on day to day in Thrive Flowers and meet the staff, and it's quite immersive, and it's a dream come true. I always had this vision that I'd have something big like this with the two stories, 2 levels, but I didn't know it would be in Moorabbin. And the reason we moved to Moorabbin is because our wholesaler, a dear friend of mine, Rani, who was one of the men that hired me to run his retail store and really make it wonderful before he sold it. And we've been really good friends for a long time. Throughout my career, it's been challenging. It's had its ups and downs. It's been full on. I haven't known what I'm doing. I've had imposter syndrome so much, and the whole fake it till I make it, and it's all natural. Like, it still happens to me sometimes, and I still can't believe that, you know, I've been in the industry 22 years now, and I can't believe still that I've achieved what I've achieved. And the industry ended up catching up to what I needed it to be. So I do want to be a florist and I don't want to give up. And at some point, possibly about 7 or 8 years ago, it started to become super creative and big backdrops and suspended stuff, and every bouquet, every arrangement we do, like, everyone wants colors and textures and shapes and sizes, and it's become really exciting. And not only that, people want to include other elements of nature. So there's big leaves and bark, and we can, you know, have pebbles and fruit and vegetables and everything included with flowers, and people understand how good flowers are for the soul and the whole creativity side of things. And it finally became what I needed it to become, and I waited a very long time for that. But I was resilient and determined to make it work. There's been so many times when I've wanted to give up, and I haven't been sure if I can just do it anymore, but I know that this is my path, and I didn't choose it, it chose me, and that's pretty special in my mind. In a challenge, but it's so rewarding. It's the most rewarding industry you can work in, and now also to have a school. Bloom College and Thrive Flowers are sister schools, and Bloom College is online only now, and Thrive Flower School is the in-person classes, and that sort of came out of COVID as well. And I never thought I'd own my own flower school. And when Yvette said, "I've got a great idea, why don't you start your own school?" I laughed at her and I said, "There's no way I need a school. That's a third business. I'm just coming out of COVID. Who would be crazy enough to take on and run a school?" So yes, here we are, a Thrive Flower School, and I still cannot believe that I own my own school. And we're focusing on sustainability. The industry needs a school like this. I want to teach all of my students how to be as sustainable as they can in this industry, which is really important to me and close to my heart. And it comes from when I, you know, grew up on the farm, and I love the land. I just want everyone to be more sustainable and really care about our planet. So that's pretty much it. That's my story. Hope you enjoyed it.